Maya Rodriguez stared at the fluorescent-lit hallway and wondered, not for the first time, how her life had become a series of increasingly questionable decisions. The email had been simple enough: congratulations. You've been selected for the Global Academic Excellence Assessment. Full scholarship potential. Testing location: Riverside Community College, basement level B7. The thing was, Riverside Community College didn't have a basement level B7. Maya had checked. Twice. But student loans were a special kind of hell, and desperate times called for potentially sketchy scholarship opportunities. So here she was, following signs written in what looked like Comic Sans font, down a corridor that seemed way too high-tech for a community college basement. The walls were some kind of smooth metal that hummed softly, and the lighting was that perfect, shadowless kind you usually only saw in science fiction movies. Ah, another test taker arrives. The voice belonged to what Maya could only describe as a 7-foot-tall purple grasshopper wearing a three-piece suit. He had compound eyes that sparkled with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for game show hosts and multi-level marketing distributors. I am Claxon, your proctor for today's assessment. You may pronounce it Clarkson if the phonetics prove challenging to your vocal apparatus. Maya blinked. Then blinked again. I'm sorry, what exactly are you? Oh, how delightfully direct. I do appreciate species that cut straight to the point. Makes the final tally so much more accurate. Claxon consulted a tablet that seemed to be made of crystallized light. You must be Maya Rodriguez, age 22, studying, let me see, undeclared major with a minor in procrastination and a concentration in student debt. That's oddly specific. Maya looked around the waiting area, which contained about 20 other humans, all looking various degrees of confused and excited. And you still haven't answered my question about what you are. Ah yes, the curiosity factor. We'll be sure to note that in your file. I'm what you might call an evaluation specialist. Today's assessment will determine your species' continued viability in the galactic community. Claxon's smile revealed far too many teeth. It's really quite an honor. Most species only get one chance at this particular examination. Most species, Maya repeated slowly. And what happens to the ones who don't pass? Oh, don't worry about that. I'm sure you'll do just fine. Your species shows such promise in areas of tactical thinking and acceptable casualty management. Now, if you'll just take a seat, we'll begin the preliminary evaluation shortly. Maya sat down next to a nervous-looking guy in a Harvard sweatshirt who was furiously reviewing flashcards. She caught a glimpse of one question: optimal siege duration for maximum psychological impact. Answer: 14 to 18 months depending on seasonal food storage. She was definitely not in Kansas anymore, or taking a normal scholarship test. Excuse me, she said to Harvard sweatshirt. What exactly did your invitation say this test was for? Advanced Strategic Planning Scholarship, he replied without looking up. I'll ride to Métis if I score in the top percentile. I've been preparing for months. Did you know the average human can survive 43 days without food but only 3 days without water? It's amazing what you can learn when you really apply yourself. Maya stared at him. And that seemed normal to you? Well, it's Métis. They're known for rigorous academics. Right. Why? Maya looked around the room again, noting the exit doors that seemed to have way too many locks for a simple testing facility, and the cameras that tracked movement with a precision that seemed less security and more targeting system. Attention, test takers. Claxon clapped his 4 hands together. We're ready to begin. Please proceed to the examination chamber. Remember, this assessment will determine not just your individual futures, but the future of your entire species. No pressure. As Maya filed into the next room with the other test takers, she caught sight of a smaller alien lurking behind Claxon. This one looked like a nervous turtle crossed with a filing cabinet, and it kept wringing its hands and muttering something that sounded suspiciously like "This is such a bad idea." The exam room itself was impressive in a deeply unsettling way. Each seat was surrounded by a translucent barrier that hummed with energy. The walls were covered in screens showing various planets, some lush and green, others looking suspiciously like smoking craters, and the ceiling displayed what appeared to be a real-time view of Earth from space. Maya took her assigned seat and found a tablet waiting for her. The screen displayed Galactic Species Viability Assessment. Question 1 of 847. Please answer honestly. Your species' continued existence may depend on your responses. She looked around the room. Everyone else was already starting their tests, faces serious and concentrated. Maya had a sinking feeling that she was about to become the star of the universe's most twisted game show. The first few questions seemed innocent enough if you ignored the slightly ominous phrasing. What is your species' preferred method of conflict resolution? Had options ranging from diplomatic negotiation to total annihilation of opposing forces. Maya selected the diplomatic option naturally. Question 15 asked her to rate the effectiveness of the following psychological warfare techniques on a scale of 1 to 10. Maya stared at the list, which included things like continuous low-frequency sound bombardment and strategic contamination of water supplies. She was pretty sure this wasn't a normal scholarship test. By question 30, the pretense had been completely abandoned. In a hypothetical scenario where your species encounters a technologically superior civilization, which of the following would be your preferred first strike option? The multiple-choice answers made Maya's stomach turn. She glanced around the room. The guy in the Harvard sweatshirt was taking notes in the margins, looking like he was having the time of his life. A woman in business attire was using a calculator for what appeared to be casualty projections. A teenager with purple hair was doodling what looked suspiciously like battle formations. Maya raised her hand. The nervous turtle filing cabinet alien scuttled over immediately. His name tag read Bricks in friendly letters that somehow made everything worse. Yes, test taker, Bricks whispered, glancing nervously toward Klaxon, who was monitoring the room with the intensity of a hawk watching mice. I think there might be some mistake, Maya said quietly. This doesn't seem like a scholarship test. Bricks's eyes went wide. Oh, no, you mustn't say things like that. The walls have ears, you know. Very good ears. Ears that remember everything. And report back to very important people who make very permanent decisions. Permanent decisions about what? About whether your species gets to keep existing, of course. Bricks's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Between you and me, I really think this whole evaluation process is terribly unfair. I mean, judging an entire species based on how well they can plan military campaigns? But what do I know? I'm just a filing assistant. Maya felt ice water in her veins. What happened to the other species who took this test? Oh, well, some of them passed. The Zephyrians, for instance. Lovely people. Very peaceful. They grow the most beautiful crystals now in their nature preserve. And the Melanites. They make excellent fertilizer for the Galactic botanical gardens. Nature preserve, Maya repeated. Botanical gardens. Yes, it's really quite humane. Much better than the old system, which was just immediate orbital bombardment. This way, the worthy ones get to live out their natural lives in controlled environments. Very ethical. Maya looked back at her test. Question 47 was asking her to design an optimal interrogation protocol. Around the room, her fellow humans were diligently working away, some actually looking excited about the challenge. She tried to stand up, but discovered that the energy barrier around her seat had solidified. She was effectively trapped in a translucent box. Oh yes, Bricks said apologetically. The containment fields activate once testing begins. Safety protocol, you understand. Can't have test takers sharing answers or, escaping and warning their home planets. This is insane, Maya said. That's what the Vorthan representative said. Right before the committee decided their species was too emotionally unstable for galactic citizenship. Bricks sighed. I really should get back to my station. Klaxon gets upset when I chat too long with the test takers. Just remember, answer honestly. The scanning equipment can detect deception, so there's really no point in trying to game the system. As Bricks scuttled away, Maya stared at her tablet. The next question asked her to calculate the minimum population size needed to maintain genetic diversity after a hypothetical population reduction event. She looked around the room again. 20 humans, representing the entire species in what was apparently a trial for their right to exist. And most of them were treating it like any other standardized test, focused on getting good scores rather than understanding what those scores actually meant. Maya made a decision. She started selecting the most peaceful, least threatening answers she could find. When asked about military strategy, she chose options focused on defense rather than offense. When presented with scenarios about resource scarcity, she picked the answers about cooperation and sharing. The tablet beeped disapprovingly after each selection. A small message appeared. Response indicates possible deception or species atypicality. Please reconsider your answer. Maya ignored it and kept going. Around her, the energy barriers hummed ominously, and she began to notice that some of the screens on the walls were showing what looked like weapons charging up. This was definitely not a scholarship test. Maya had just finished question 93, something about optimal siege tactics for urban environments, when Klaxon appeared beside her containment field like a purple nightmare in business attire. Miss Rodriguez. How delightful to see such careful consideration of each question. Though I must say your response pattern is quite unusual for your species. My species? Maya looked up from her tablet. And what exactly do you know about my species? Klaxon's compound eyes sparkled with what Maya was beginning to recognize as condescending enthusiasm. Oh, we know quite a lot. Humans are fascinating creatures. So warlike, so creative in their approach to violence, so remarkably efficient at eliminating threats. That's why you're here. I thought this was a scholarship test. Oh my, no, this is a species viability assessment. We use the scholarship pretense because we found that humans perform better when they believe they're competing for personal advancement. Quite telling, really. Klaxon consulted his crystalline tablet. The Galactic Peace Council decided it was time to evaluate whether humanity is compatible with civilized society, or whether you represent too great a threat to allow continued independent existence. Maya felt her blood turn to ice water. And what happens if we fail? Well, the previous 47 species who failed their assessments are now living in carefully managed nature preserves, much more humane than the old system of immediate planetary sterilization. They get to maintain their cultural practices, reproduce within sustainable limits, and contribute to galactic biodiversity. It's really quite progressive. 47 species, Maya repeated. Oh yes, the Zephyrians were particularly disappointing. Such a peaceful species. But their psychological profiles indicated they might become aggressive if sufficiently provoked. Can't have that sort of unpredictability in civilized space. The Gythonians were brilliant engineers, but they kept asking uncomfortable questions about the Council's authority. And the Melanites. Klaxon chuckled. They actually tried to negotiate the terms of their assessment, as if such things were up for debate. Maya glanced around the room and noticed that one of her fellow test-takers was absolutely dominating his exam. A middle-aged man in a rumpled accountant's blazer was working through questions with the focused intensity of someone solving a particularly engaging puzzle. "Who's that?" she asked. "Oh, that's Jenkins. Wonderful test-taker. He's currently achieving a 97% accuracy rate on tactical scenarios. Remarkable intuition for orbital bombardment logistics. And his economic warfare strategies are simply inspired. He's exactly the sort of human we expected to find." Maya watched Jenkins for a moment. He was sketching diagrams in his margins, calculating supply chain vulnerabilities with the same careful attention most people gave to their taxes, which, she realized, was probably exactly what this felt like to him. "The thing is," Maya said carefully, "I don't think you're testing what you think you're testing." "Oh?" Klaxon leaned closer to her containment field. "Do enlighten me." "Jenkins isn't a military strategist. He's an accountant. He's not thinking about warfare, he's thinking about efficiency problems. Humans like puzzles. We'll solve any puzzle you put in front of us, even if we don't agree with the premise. Fascinating theory, but quite irrelevant. The assessment measures practical capabilities, not intentions. If your species can design effective military campaigns, then your species is militaristic." Maya looked back at her tablet. The next question was asking her to optimize a planetary blockade for maximum psychological impact while minimizing resource expenditure. She deliberately selected the least effective option. "You know," she said conversationally, "there's something I'm curious about." "Oh? Ow? How many species have actually passed this test?" Klaxon's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. Well, that's not really the point of the assessment. The point is to identify species that pose potential threats. So, none of them. 47 species have taken this test, and all 47 failed. The parameters are quite rigorous. We can't afford to make mistakes when it comes to galactic security. Maya nodded thoughtfully. Right. So this isn't really a test at all. This is just a very elaborate execution method. The energy barrier around her seat flickered, and Maya realized she'd struck a nerve. Around the room, other humans were still working diligently on their assessments, completely oblivious to the fact that they were essentially writing their own species' death warrant. I think, Maya said, I'd like to speak to your manager. Klaxon's compound eyes went wide. I beg your pardon? Or manager? Supervisor? Whoever's actually in charge of this operation. Because either you're lying to me about the nature of this test, or you're lying to yourself about its purpose. Either way, I think it's time for some truth in advertising. For the first time since Maya had met him, Klaxon looked uncertain. That's not how assessments work. Sure it is. I'm assessing whether this process is legitimate, and I've determined that I need more information. So let's chat with the boss. Maya sat back in her chair and crossed her arms. Around her, the containment field hummed ominously, but she ignored it. She was done playing by their rules. Maya's request to speak to management had caused quite a stir. Klaxon was huddled in the corner with Bricks and two other aliens who had materialized from hidden panels in the walls. They were having an intense whispered conversation that involved a lot of gesturing and what sounded like interdimensional swearing. Meanwhile, Maya had managed to catch the attention of a few other test takers by the simple expedient of loudly announcing, "Hey, does anyone else think it's weird that a scholarship test is asking us to design weapons of mass destruction?" The woman in business attire looked up from her tablet. "I'm Zara Kim," she said, "and I figured out this was a setup about 10 minutes in. The real question is why the rest of you are still playing along. Because it's clearly some kind of psychological evaluation," said a mild-mannered man with graying hair and elbow patches. "I'm Dr. Pemberton, Philosophy Department at Northwestern. This is obviously a test of moral reasoning under pressure. The real assessment is whether we choose ethical responses when presented with unethical options." Maya stared at him. "Dr. Pemberton, what did you put down for the question about optimal civilian casualty ratios?" "Well, I reasoned that if this is a test of moral judgment, they want to see if I can calculate the minimum necessary harm to achieve strategic objectives. So I developed a framework that prioritizes non-combatant safety while maintaining tactical effectiveness. It's actually quite elegant. You establish humanitarian corridors here, implement graduated response protocols here, and—" "Oh my God," Zara said. "You accidentally designed the most ethical genocide in history." Dr. Pemberton looked confused. "Genocide? No. This is clearly a philosophical thought experiment about the lesser of evils." "It's not a thought experiment," Maya shouted, causing several other test takers to look up from their work. "This is a real assessment to determine whether humanity gets to continue existing, and you people are solving it like it's the world's most morbid word problem." Jenkins looked over from his station. "Wait, this isn't for MIT." "No, Jenkins, this is not from MIT. This is aliens deciding whether to turn Earth into a nature preserve." "Well, that's disappointing," Jenkins said. "I was really looking forward to getting my master's degree." Zara stood up, which caused her containment field to flicker warningly. "Okay, everyone listen up. We are currently prisoners of what appears to be an intergalactic tribunal that has already decided we're too dangerous to live. They're just going through the motions of this test to make themselves feel better about committing genocide." "That seems rather pessimistic," Dr. Pemberton said. "Surely any sufficiently advanced civilization would have ethical safeguards. Like the ethical safeguards they used on the 47 other species they've already wiped out?" This got everyone's attention. Around the room, humans were finally starting to look up from their tablets and take in their surroundings. The energy barriers. The weapons systems built into the walls. The viewing screens showing Earth from orbit with what were definitely targeting overlays. "So what do we do?" asked the teenager with purple hair. "I'm Luna, by the way. And I've been drawing anime characters in the margins." so my answers are probably all wrong anyway. That's the thing, Maya said. I don't think there are wrong answers. I think this whole test is designed to make us fail. Every question is a trap. Every scenario is set up to make us look violent or dangerous or threatening. But that's impossible, Dr. Pemberton protested. There must be some way to pass. Otherwise, why have the test at all? Zara laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Because they want to feel good about themselves. It's easier to wipe out species if you can point to a test that proves they deserved it. The conversation was interrupted by Klaxon's return. The purple grasshopper looked significantly less enthusiastic than before, and he was flanked by what appeared to be security personnel, hulking creatures that looked like they were made of living metal and bad intentions. Test takers, Klaxon announced, we're going to implement special protocols for the remainder of your assessment. Please return to your tablets. What kind of special protocols? Maya asked. The kind where you don't get to ask questions anymore, one of the security guards rumbled. Maya looked around the room. Funny humans, all trapped in energy fields, all surrounded by aliens with weapons and bad attitudes, all taking a test designed to justify their species' extinction. The smart thing would be to sit down, shut up, and try to find some way to game the system. Maya had never been particularly smart. You know what? She said. I think we need to have a different conversation entirely. The containment field around her seat began to pulse more aggressively, but Maya ignored it. I want to know about your backup plans. Because species this paranoid don't set up elaborate testing facilities without contingencies. So what happens if we refuse to take your test? Klaxon's compound eyes flickered nervously. That's not. Test takers are required to complete their assessments. Or what? You'll kill us? You're already planning to do that. We will relocate your species to appropriate preservation facilities. Same thing. Maya looked around the room. How many of you are getting tired of being polite to people who are planning to commit genocide? And for the first time since the test began, Maya saw something that made her smile. Her fellow humans were starting to look angry. The mood in the exam room had shifted dramatically. What started as a standardized test had become something much more tense, much more honest, and significantly more dangerous for everyone involved. Look, Maya said, addressing Klaxon directly while the security guards loomed ominously. Let's cut to the chase. You've already made up your minds about us. This test is just theater to make yourselves feel better about planetary genocide. So let's skip the pretense and get to the real question. Which is? Klaxon asked, though his enthusiasm had been replaced by something that looked suspiciously like fear. Maya smiled, and it wasn't a particularly nice smile. How many are we allowed to leave alive? The silence in the room was profound. Every human test taker was now staring at Maya, and every alien was very carefully not making eye contact with anyone. I beg your pardon? Klaxon said faintly. It's a reasonable question. You've established that coexistence isn't an option. You've made it clear that you consider us too dangerous for independent existence. So obviously. The next step is determining casualty limits. How many of you can we eliminate before you decide we've proven your point? Dr. Pemberton looked alarmed. Maya, surely you're not suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything, Dr. Pemberton. I'm just asking about the parameters of our assessment. They want to know if we're violent? Fine, let's discuss violence. Zara caught on immediately. Right, because obviously if we're being evaluated for our threat potential, we should demonstrate exactly what we're capable of. Now wait just a minute, Klaxon started. No, this is fascinating, Jenkins said, pulling out his calculator. From an efficiency standpoint, we're looking at roughly 40-to-1 odds in this facility alone. Standard force multiplication factors would suggest that with proper planning and resource utilization. Stop, Klaxon said, his voice rising to what Maya suspected was the alien equivalent of panic. This is not how assessments work. Why not? Luna asked. You want to see how dangerous we are when we're threatened. Well, congratulations. We feel pretty threatened right now. Maya stood up, and this time her containment field flickered and died entirely. Around the room, other barriers were failing as well. Here's the thing you didn't account for in your little test. You assumed that our violence was random, chaotic, uncontrolled. But it's not. We're very, very good at controlled violence when we need to be. And Zara added, standing as well, we're even better at creative thinking under pressure. The security systems in this facility, Dr. Pemberton said thoughtfully, are designed to contain individual test takers, not to handle coordinated resistance from a group that understands they have nothing to lose. Brix was making small, distressed noises in the corner. This is exactly what I was afraid of. This is why I said the assessment protocol was flawed. You can't threaten humans and expect them to react predictably. What are you saying? Klaxon demanded. I'm saying, Maya replied, that your test is fundamentally broken. You're not measuring our capacity for violence. You're measuring our capacity for problem-solving under pressure. And the problem you've given us is, how do we survive when faced with an existential threat from a technologically superior force? And humans, Jenkins added helpfully, are really, really good at that particular problem. The security guards were starting to look nervous. Maya noticed that their weapons weren't actually aimed at the humans anymore, they were aimed at the exits. You want to know what makes us dangerous? Maya continued. It's not that we're violent. It's that we refuse to accept no-win scenarios. Every other species you tested probably spent their time trying to prove they weren't a threat. But we're not interested in proving anything to you. We're interested in changing the rules of the game, Zara said. Because that's what humans do, Dr. Pemberton added. We don't accept that the universe has to work the way other people say it does. Klaxon was backing toward the exit, his compound eyes wide with what Maya realized was recognition. You're actually as dangerous as the projections suggested. More dangerous, Maya corrected. Because your projections assumed we'd play by your rules. But here's the thing about humans that your Galactic Peace Council apparently missed. We don't play by other people's rules. We make our own. And right now, Luna said cheerfully, our rules say that anyone who tries to commit genocide gets to find out exactly how creative humans can be when properly motivated. The security systems were failing throughout the facility now. Maya could hear alarms going off in distant corridors, and the screens showing Earth from orbit were flickering between targeting displays and what looked suspiciously like system error messages. This is impossible, Klaxon said. You're contained. You're isolated. You have no weapons, no technology, no way to. We have something better, Maya interrupted. We have 20 humans who are really, really tired of being polite to people who want us dead. Brix scuttled over to Klaxon, wringing his hands. I told you this would happen. I told you the assessment was flawed. Humans don't respond to existential threats the way other species do. How do they respond? Klaxon asked faintly. They get creative, Brix said. And when humans get creative, very bad things happen to anyone standing in their way. Maya looked around the room. Her fellow humans were all standing now, containment fields completely offline, and they were looking at their captors with expressions that ranged from annoyed to genuinely dangerous. So, she said pleasantly, shall we discuss the terms of our graduation? The thing about humans, Maya reflected as she watched Klaxon frantically trying to contact his superiors, is that they're fundamentally allergic to authority figures who can't justify their authority. The Galactic Peace Council is not going to be pleased about this, Klaxon was saying into his communication device. The test subjects have deviated from expected parameters. Is that what we're calling it? Zara asked. She was examining one of the security guards who had apparently decided that standing very still and not making eye contact was the safest possible strategy. Because I'd call it refusing to cooperate with our own genocide. The assessment protocols clearly state, Klaxon began. Your assessment protocols, Dr. Pemberton interrupted, are based on a fundamental misunderstanding of human psychology. You assumed that when faced with an existential threat, we would become more violent. In fact, we became more cooperative. We started working together. Which, Jenkins added, consulting his notes, actually makes us significantly more dangerous than your projections suggested. Individual humans are chaotic and unpredictable. Humans working as a team are terrifying. Maya walked over to where Brix was huddled by the communication console. You said not all aliens supported this assessment program? Oh no, Brix said quickly. Many of us thought it was a terrible idea. But the Peace Council insisted that proactive threat assessment was necessary for galactic stability. And how's that working out for them? Brix gestured helplessly at the room, where 20 humans were now casually dismantling alien technology with the focused enthusiasm of people who had found an interesting puzzle. About as well as you'd expect. Luna had somehow managed to reprogram one of the viewing screens to display Earth with what appeared to be a giant smiley face overlaid on North America. Hey Maya, I think I figured out how to send messages back home. Want me to let everyone know we're okay? Actually, Maya said thoughtfully, I have a better idea. Can you patch us through to this Galactic Peace Council? Oh, that's really not advisable, Klaxon started. I wasn't asking you. Maya looked at Brix. Can we talk to them directly? Well, technically yes, but... Great. Let's have a chat. 5 minutes later, Maya found herself looking at a screen filled with what appeared to be the universe's most uptight committee meeting. The Galactic Peace Council consisted of representatives from dozens of species, all of whom looked like they spent their days filing reports about filing reports. This is highly irregular, the lead council member was saying. Test subjects are not permitted to address the council directly. Yeah, well, your test subjects have some feedback about your assessment process, Maya replied. Specifically, we'd like to discuss the fundamental flaws in your methodology. There are no flaws. Sure there are. You're testing species to see if they're too dangerous to coexist with you. But you're using threat scenarios that measure problem-solving ability, not aggression. Every species you've tested has failed because you're not actually measuring what you think you're measuring. Dr. Pemberton stepped forward. From a philosophical standpoint, your entire approach is ethically questionable. You're assuming that the capacity for violence equals the tendency toward violence. But that's simply not how sapient behavior works. And from a practical standpoint, Jenkins added, your security systems are woefully inadequate for containing species that don't accept the premise of your authority. Around the exam room, the other humans were nodding agreement. Even the security guards were starting to look like they found the whole situation more embarrassing than threatening. The fact remains, the council leader said stiffly, that your species has demonstrated exactly the sort of dangerous unpredictability we were concerned about. Right, Maya said. We've demonstrated that when you threaten us with extinction, we don't roll over and accept it. How is that dangerous to anyone who isn't trying to commit genocide? Your refusal to accept proper authority. Our refusal to accept illegitimate authority, Zara corrected. There's a difference. Maya looked around the room, at her fellow humans who had gone from confused test takers to a coordinated resistance movement in the space of a few hours. At the aliens who were starting to look more embarrassed than threatening. At the communication screen showing a council of species who had apparently never encountered anyone willing to question their assumptions. Here's what's going to happen, she said. We're going home. You're going to leave Earth alone. And in the future, when you want to evaluate a species for galactic citizenship, you're going to try actually talking to them instead of subjecting them to elaborate psychological torture. That's not how the assessment process works, the council leader protested. It is now, Maya replied. Because the alternative is finding out what humans are really capable of when we put our minds to it. And trust me, you don't want that assessment. Brix scuttled forward. If I may, council leader, the human approach does have some merit. Perhaps a diplomatic evaluation process would be more accurate and less likely to result in test subjects taking over your facilities, Luna added helpfully. There was a long pause. Then the council leader sighed, a sound that somehow translated across species barriers as the universal expression of bureaucratic defeat. Very well. The assessment will be reconsidered. Great, Maya said. And just so we're clear, Earth is going to be implementing its own assessment program for species that want diplomatic contact. We'll be evaluating you for excessive paranoia, genocide tendencies, and general failure to understand how cooperative relationships work. You can't assess us. We're the assessors. Maya grinned. Watch us. 6 months later, Maya was sitting in her new office at the newly established Human Diplomatic Assessment Center, reviewing applications from alien species who wanted to establish formal relations with Earth. The process was surprisingly popular, possibly because it was the first interspecies evaluation program that didn't involve elaborate death scenarios. Klaxon knocked on her door. He'd taken a job with the new program after what he called his philosophical awakening about the flaws in threat-based diplomacy. The Zephyrian delegation is here for their assessment, he said. They seem quite nervous. Of course they're nervous, Maya replied. They spent the last 50 years in a nature preserve because your old bosses thought they might be dangerous. Let them know we'll start with some simple questions about conflict resolution and work our way up to the hard stuff. Such as, when faced with a problem that seems impossible to solve, do you accept defeat, or do you start looking for ways to change the rules? Klaxon's compound eyes sparkled with something that might have been amusement. And if they give the wrong answer? Maya leaned back in her chair and smiled. Then we teach them how to give the right one. That's what humans do. We don't eliminate threats. We turn them into opportunities. Even when the threats are real? Especially then. Because the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't a species that might become violent. It's a species that's given up hope. Through her office window, Maya could see Earth turning slowly in space, no longer marked with targeting overlays but with communication arrays and welcome beacons. The universe, it turned out, was a much more interesting place when you refused to accept that some problems didn't have solutions. And if that made humans dangerous, well, Maya thought the universe could probably use a little more danger of that particular type.